Hello and welcome to the course Climate Hazards and Disaster Mitigation. Today we are going to have an overview of the Disaster Management Act 2005 of India. What we learned last time, we understood the structure, necessity and key components of a disaster management framework. We discussed case studies related to best disaster management practices, and we also explored the linkages between disaster risk reduction and sustainable development goals. The learning objectives for today's lecture are: we'll understand the developmental history of the Disaster Management Act 2005 of India. We'll present an overview of the Disaster Management Act 2005 and will recognize the roles, responsibilities and functions of the National Disaster Management Authority. So the Disaster Management Act 2005 was enacted by Government of India on 23rd December 2005 to establish a comprehensive legal, institutional and policy framework for disaster management across the country. The Act promotes a coordinated, systematic and holistic approach encompassing disaster prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, relief, rehabilitation and reconstruction. It was formulated in response to the increasing frequency, intensity and socio-economic impacts of both natural and man-made disasters in India. Now, this act was established with the aim to clearly define the roles, responsibilities and powers of various authorities at various governance levels, that is national, state and district levels, to ensure a very integrated and accountable system. Now, given the history of law, India has a very long history of earthquakes, floods, cyclones and other extreme events. So this act primarily represents a critical shift from relief centric approach to a more proactive disaster management approach. So in the earlier lectures we have seen that what used to happen, that if a disaster has struck, then what relief measures should be taken. So it was mostly a post disaster kind of intervention. But now this act has brought something new, that it more relies on the preemptive measure, that is what can be done to mitigate the disaster before the disaster strikes. So it is a more proactive based approach which we have been following. So why this act was required? As discussed earlier, there was large scale disaster and because of growing population, urbanization effects, the vulnerability has also increased. So it was very essential to move towards a proactive disaster management system. So in the pre-2005 scenario, the disaster management was largely reactive, focused on post-disaster relief. Also, there was absence of any legal mandate, permanent institutions and long-term planning mechanisms. 58% of landmass of India is prone to earthquakes. There is a long coastline which increases the risk of cyclones and tsunamis. 68% of the cultivable area is prone to droughts and the floods are more frequent, landslides and heat extremes are evolving over the time. So which events occurred as a triggering disaster event? So the 1999 Odisha super cyclone was one of the triggers, because it exposed the failures of our early warning system and lack and evacuation. 2001 Gujarat earthquake, it revealed unsafe infrastructure and poor preparedness. And 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, which highlighted the absence of a national authority, warning systems and coordinated response between different agencies. In line with the global shift in disaster thinking, we have already reviewed the Yokohama strategy and Yogo framework, which more emphasized on risk reduction over relief and prevention and mitigation, which should be integrated into any development. So because of all these factors, it felt a need that there should be a legal and institutional framework which can have a multi-level structure, which will clearly define the roles at national, state and district levels, and there will be some legal authority for coordination, resource allocation and enforcement. So discussing the 1999 Odisha super cyclone, so the winds clocked up to 250 km per hour. It almost caused casualties up to 10,000 people. The fisher flock were worst affected. They lost boats and fishing nets. Livestock was also largely affected, 3.15 lakh cattle, 18 lakh poultry and small animals. Agriculture devastation was way beyond our imagination, and the homes were destroyed, leaving almost close to 1.5 more than 1.5 million people homeless. The 2001 Gujarat earthquake, it struck on the Republic Day, 26 January 2001, where on Richter scale it was 7.6 magnitude, which affected 28 million people, 1.2 million buildings were destroyed, and close to 1.6 lakh people were injured and 20,000 people were killed. So you can imagine the amount of devastation which is caused. And the Indian Ocean tsunami, so this is a image taken from the devastation which caused somewhere near the epicenter in Indonesia. So imagine the devastation caused there, and from here it traveled all the way to the Bay of Bengal. So all the states, particularly on the eastern coast, were more vulnerable. Around 16,000 people were dead or missing in India. So compared to the other countries in the region, Thailand and India were more on the receiving end, of course Sri Lanka, while Malaysia, Bangladesh, Myanmar were less affected. Indonesia being the most affected country. So a high-powered committee was set up in 1999. Then until 2001, the responsibility of disaster management was with Agriculture Ministry. It was transferred to the Home Ministry in 2002. Then a National Disaster Management Authority was established, and the Disaster Management Act was passed by the Parliament in 2005. So let us discuss the Disaster Management Act 2005. So we'll discuss key chapters and provisions of this act. So to start with, the preliminary ideas about what is the title of the act. So the short title is Disaster Management Act 2005. It applies to the entire territory of India, including all states and union territories. It comes into force on the dates notified by the central government, and there can be some different provisions for the states depending upon their geographical uniqueness. There are clear definitions being coined in this act, so we should understand the definition. Affected area refers to an area or region that has suffered impacts due to a disaster. Capacity building means developing resources, skills, training and coordination to manage disasters effectively. Disaster means a severe natural or man-made event causing major loss beyond the community's coping capacity. Disaster management refers to a continuous process covering prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response and recovery and reconstruction. Disaster risk indicates the probability of losses due to hazards based on exposure, vulnerability and capacity. Evacuation means temporary movement of people or assets to a safer location during disasters. Exposure, it indicates the presence of people, assets and infrastructure in hazard-prone areas. Hazard, that is a potentially damaging natural or human-induced event or process. Mitigation, they refer to the measures to reduce the disaster risk impacts, including resilient infrastructure. Preparedness indicates the readiness of governments, communities and institutions to handle disasters. Prevention refers to the action taken to avoid or eliminate potential disaster impacts. Reconstruction is the act of rebuilding infrastructure and services like power services, restoring power, energy, gas, that is cooking gas services, then telecom services, communication services after a disaster. Recovery implies restoring and improving the systems and livelihoods post the disaster. Rehabilitation is more oriented towards restoring the basic services like water, food, etc. Resilience, the ability to absorb, resist and respond and recover from disaster. Response indicates immediate action taken before, during or after a disaster to save lives. And lastly, vulnerability, that refers to the condition that increases the susceptibility of people or systems to the hazard. So let us understand the institutional framework. So it is a three-tier mechanism starting from the national level, state level and the district level. So in national level you have the National Crisis Management Committee, Executive Committee, Disaster Management Authority, National Institute of Disaster Management, National Disaster Response Force and Armed Forces. If there is a very emergency situation, the armed forces are invoked to help in the disaster relief. State level, they have the State Executive Committee, State Disaster Management Authority, State Disaster Response Force, Department of Home, Police and Fire Services. At district level, you have District Disaster Management Authority, Police, Fire Services and Civil Defense and other volunteers. So this is a 3-tier structure being having a hierarchy and clear-cut roles and responsibilities being defined. Coming to the chapter 2, where we discuss about the National Disaster Management Authority. So the NDMA is an apex body of the disaster management in India, which is chaired by the Prime Minister. So Prime Minister is the ex officio chairperson. The chairperson can nominate any other members, but the maximum capacity should be 9. One of the nominated members can be vice chairman, who can preside in absence of the chairman. Moving to the next section, where meetings, the chairperson decides the frequency of meetings, and usually the chairperson, that is the Prime Minister, presides over the meeting. Otherwise some other can take over the meeting. The section 5 deals with the appointment of officers and other employees of the NDMA. So NDMA can decide what staff they require with prior approval of the central government. They can also appoint consultants for technical support, and their salary and service conditions are regulated by the Government of India rules. Section 6 caters to the powers and functions of the national authority under the Disaster Management Act. What is the overall responsibility that of NDMA? To frame national policies, plans and guidelines to ensure effective disaster management. Key powers and functions include policy formulation, then national plan oversight, so it should coordinate and approve the national disaster management plan. It should also approve the central plans prepared by different union ministries, and also issue guidelines to the states to prepare their own disaster management plans. It should mainstream DRR, that is disaster risk reduction, in all development projects. It should coordinate the implementation of disaster policies nationwide. It should also recommend funds for disaster mitigation activities. It should offer international assistance, that is support for disaster affected countries. We have already seen India's disaster diplomacy, that it extends help to the neighboring countries and abroad in case of key disasters. So we have already gone through that. It also provides technical and capacity support, so to have skilled manpower. It will give guidance to the National Institute of Disaster Management. It will monitor the implementation of policies, and it will issue guidelines for the ministries and the state governments. Technical support, it will assist states in preparing the disaster management plan. It will advise government on how to mitigate, prepare and for any disaster. It will periodically assess the existing and emerging disaster risks. It will plan national level disaster management training programs. It will guide state, district and urban authorities. It will spread awareness among the people and educate them. It will monitor disaster risk reduction and also periodically assess preparedness to any disasters. For example, there are regular mock drills in case of earthquake, how to evacuate a building in case of earthquake, fire or any kind of hazard. One more important aspect is the NDMA takes more challenges. For example, if we talk about COVID-19, it was an unforeseen event, unprecedented event which had no guidelines in general. So, learning from taking the past learning forward. So that is also one of the mandate where such kind of disasters, if they occur in future, how to tackle them. Post-disaster audit, that is what I was talking about. After a disaster, they do an audit, what went wrong and what was correct and what needs to be done in future. Maintain a database of all natural disasters, and there should be minimum relief standards to be disseminated to the affected people. In case of emergencies, the chairperson may exercise NDMA's power. So the chairperson, for example, in COVID-19, they imposed a nationwide lockdown. That was the emergency power vested in the chairperson to tackle any kind of disaster. Section 7 deals with the constitution of advisory committee of the NDMA. So the NDMA can establish an expert advisory committee to recommend measures on various aspects of disaster management. The members of the committee are paid allowances by the central government. Section 8 refers to the constitution of National Executive Committee. So the NEC will assist the NDMA in all matters related to the functioning of the NDMA. The NEC consists of the Disaster Management Secretary as the chairperson and secretaries of key ministries and defense representative as their ex officio members. They may also invite central and state officers to attend the meeting. and NEC shall function according to procedures laid down by the central government. Section 8A refers to the National Crisis Management Committee. So the nodal role of this committee is it is a central body to manage major disasters with serious national impacts. It is headed by the cabinet secretary with the members notified by the central government. So National Crisis Management Committee can also invite peoples outside their domain, that is from the state and the central governments. There is another high level committee. So this committee approves and provides financial assistance to state for disaster relief and response. For example, some disaster occurred in a state, they will ask for some compensation. So this committee will deliberate and discuss all the things. So it is chaired by the union minister in charge of disaster management, and it will provide financial assistance to the states. Again, there are provision to constitute subcommittees under each for different disasters. They can constitute subcommittees, or different regions they can constitute subcommittees. Section 10 deals with the powers and functions of the National Executive Committee. So the NEC is essentially a coordinating body for disaster management across the country. It also monitors the implementation of national plans and disaster plans of various ministries. So it coordinates, monitors and issues direction on mitigation and preparedness by ministries and agencies. It will also check the preparedness at different government levels. It will coordinate response during any threatening disaster situation or actual disaster. It issues guidelines to the central and state authorities how to respond in case of any disaster. It advises, assists and coordinates activities of the government, NGOs and other statutory bodies. It will also involve in multi-state coordination in case of a disaster. The section 11 deals with the national plan. So the national plan provides a comprehensive national disaster management plan to guide prevention, preparedness, mitigation, response and coordination across the country. So this national plan is done in consultation with the central and state government and other stakeholders. So the plan includes strategies to prevent disasters or reduce the impacts. They also ensure that the development plans and projects should consider disaster mitigation. For example, a tunnel is being created or any other bridge is created, so that infrastructure project should consider that in case of a disaster management disaster event, how mitigation can be carried out, if people are stranded there, how they can be rescued. So these are things are taken into consideration. It also provides preparedness and capacity building to handle disasters effectively. It clearly defines the roles of central and state government agencies and departments. The national plan, this is very important, it should be reviewed every 3 years and updated at least 5 years. So once the plan is prepared, it does not go for eternity. It should be reviewed. What are the shortcomings that should be corrected, and new procedures should be added. So coming to the key takeaway from this lecture, the Disaster Management Act was enacted by Government of India in 2005 to establish a comprehensive legal, institutional and policy framework for disaster management across the country. So this act highlights India's shift from relief-centric approach to a more proactive, risk-based disaster management system. NDMA is the apex disaster management body of India, which is chaired by the Prime Minister, and the National Executive Committee, which acts as the operational arm of NDMA, which deals with multi-sectoral coordination in case of disaster event. Here are some additional learning resources. It will give you access to the Disaster Management Act 2005. Thank you for your attention. In the next lecture, we will discuss the key aspects of the Disaster Management Act.